Hello, welcome back. This is Roger Royce. I'm the host of the 10,000 Startups podcast, where each week we bring you original content on topics of interest to the startup community, mostly around legal issues. This week we've got one that's mostly of interest to me. It's about AI in law. And we have with us a guest who has a particular interest in investing in the space. Nuan Zhang is a VC, an experienced venture capitalist with a diverse background in technology and investment, and actually has some special interest in investing in AI for law. Now, Nuan has been a startup founder herself. Before she was a VC, she works out of London with a fund named Breega, and she gets involved in scouting, sourcing, evaluating investments, conducting due diligence, providing strategic guidance. So thanks for being here today. And before we jump into it, I just want to make sure I did justice my introduction. So maybe if there's anything else you want to add to it, now is your chance.
Thanks so much, Roger, for having me. It's a pleasure. And you actually summarized my job perfectly well into exactly what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I will give just a brief intro of Breega, the fund that I work at. So Breega is a venture capital fund, pan-European, pan-Africa. So we started in 2015 in Paris, and now we also have offices in London, Barcelona, Lagos, Cape Town, and we manage about 700 million euros. So we're a venture capital fund, so we invest very early stage into technology companies, covering pre-seed to Series B stages. We're generally pretty agnostic when it comes to sectors. So we have done hardware and software, and within the software space, B2B SaaS, AI infra, fintech, insurtech. So quite a broad range. And I've been with the company just under 2 years.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So let's jump right into it. And maybe you can tell me, is this really a thing, artificial intelligence in legal? What's the business environment like? Are law firms really using this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I have the bias of being a venture capitalist and investing in early stage companies, because we're always looking at technology innovation that is hoping to become the mainstream in probably 5 to 10 years' time. So I have to always apply a lens to adjust my bias and say that what I see now might not necessarily become the future. But at the moment in my world, legal tech is definitely all the hype. It is probably one of the hottest topics, and the business environment for AI in legal, I would say, is probably the hottest it's ever been. Just because of the nature of artificial intelligence, and especially with the emergence of large language models since I think it was November 2022. The nature of this technology is perfect for automating word related tasks. And legal is all about writing words, reading words, understanding words. Well, this is my shallow understanding. And so that's why it has been a very hot topic in founders and builders in the AI space to apply large language model and artificial intelligence to the legal space. I think I read a report, and don't quote me on the precise number. I think a Goldman Sachs report has estimated about 44% of legal work can be automated with AI. And that is a huge number and potentially very disruptive. And so I think builders in this space see the huge opportunity here to shift the revenue from services to technology within the legal space. So that's why there's a lot of companies being founded, attempting to sell to law firms, in-house legal teams, and just compliance broadly in general. But I would say just to my first point earlier, that the adoption is still very nascent. So even though we feel like the world is filled with legal tech as venture capitalists, I don't think it has trickled its way down into the day-to-day of legal professionals. Based on the people that we've spoken to, both at junior and senior level, I think that is still a topic that people are looking out into, trialing, experimenting with. But I think the consensus is that the real adoption of AI in the day-to-day job for the mass will probably take 3 to 5 years times at least.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I would think that, by nature, lawyers like me, I mean, we really are professional warriors, and we look at downside risk, and we are by nature risk averse. And I would think this would be a really difficult market to sell into as the target demographic for the portfolio companies you're investing in. I'm telling you, I would have a lot of sales resistance to this. On the other hand, if you could make my job a lot easier without, causing me to lie awake at night worrying about stuff, I might be inclined. I mean, we went through this when I first started practicing with Westlaw, and that's how old I am, with Westlaw Nexus. And, the legal community adopted that pretty quickly and pretty readily, but we all saw it as a tool and not a substitution for what we did. I mean, I
Mm,
still remember walking over to the law library and, kind of doing it the old fashioned way with hard, cover books, but I would use Westlaw and Lexis, and after that, Find Law, and then some other ones to help, get me there a little bit quicker. So I can see the resistance that your companies are getting from lawyers, but I can also recognize the opportunity. And what I come to understand now is that law firms are getting there. They're changing their mind. They're starting to adopt some of the players anyway. And I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But before I do, I want to tell you, as a lawyer, my perception of this is that the risk of hallucination is too high for me to rely on. And the reason I say that is I go on the kind of the language models that are available to all of us, and I can ask it questions about things I don't know about, and I'm perfectly okay with the answer, even though that answer, who knows? Like I don't know, health questions. Gee, do I need vitamin C? I'm okay with kind of that general stuff. Once in a while, just to see if it works, I'll ask it a legal question, and it does not always give me the right answer. In fact, I'd say half the time it doesn't, and,
yeah.
and I can give you some examples of that where I've
Hmm.
just kind of thrown a difficult legal question just to see if it could figure it out.
Mm,
And in fact, in one case, I just wanted to see if it could figure out a complex tax issue. And I gave it the question, gave me the wrong answer. And so I typed in, I said, "You're forgetting about this rule." And it came back and it said, and I
mm,
did three different AIs, different models, very
mhm,
popular ones. And they all said the same thing. And they came back and said, "You're absolutely right. The answer instead of X is Y." And I said, "No, it's a first year law school mistake. You're now forgetting about this other rule." And all three of them came back and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. The answer is Z." So it took three times at bat to get the right
yeah.
answer with a ton of coaching. So no, I would not use that in my practice, to be honest with you. So convince me otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think the concern is 100% valid. I think the example that you mentioned earlier when the firms first adopted Westlaw or LexisNexis, these tools, that was an easier adoption because you were reading books, text in books, physical books before, and now you're told, okay, you can read these case law online. They're a carbon copy of what exactly you were doing before. There's no processing of information. It's simply transporting that from one place to another. And the new place is a bit more convenient. I think people are more comfortable with this kind of evolution rather than now we're talking about the AI extracting information for you. You're not even looking at the entirety of the text, and you're having to rely on the information that AI extracted is complete and accurate. And taking it a step further, we're talking about the AI doing the judgment on your behalf, finding out what clauses in a contract are favorable or unfavorable, telling you like this is favorable versus not, or even suggesting you this is how you should argue for litigation and for your case based on these facts and law. That's when people get a lot more uncomfortable, I think, because this is where you're not seeing how the cake is baked. So I think that's why there's huge resistance. But then, yes, there's also opportunity because there are ways, if AI can be reliable and we can train the model to a point where the chance of a hallucination is so small that we can be comfortable with it. And we start small, we experiment with less lower stake tasks, and then we build trust for the tool to build credibility as well over time. And perhaps over time, we can rely on AI a bit more for us to gain product productivity. And so, yes, like to your point, using ChatGPT, asking it question is making mistakes like first year law student. But the idea is that a legal tech company that is focused on this vertical is going to use data to train the algorithm to actually understand the context of law. And so instead of just being a generic language model, they have actually the knowledge that they should consider these law clauses that you mentioned that you corrected the language model on. And the
Yeah,
idea is that
and it's what
ultimately,
all my friends told me. When I tell them that example, they say, well, you just trained 3 AI systems. And I
yeah.
said, great, where do I send my bill?
Exactly. That's the idea is that the people who are building these companies, these products, needs to do this work and be able to show you that they have done this work and for law professionals to actually rely on it. But the path to actually achieving the level of accuracy is long. And I think that the effort to outcome kind of this relationship is not linear. Perhaps it takes X amount of data and testing to get from 90% to 95%. But to get from 95% to 99 is probably 10x the amount that you originally put in. So and in legal, I understand that 95% is not good enough. Like the one fact that you miss could be a win or lose situation. So of course people don't trust it. So I understand the resistance, but of course, like AI is developing at light speed every day, and like the amount of data that is out there is also being multiplied day by day. So I guess it's a bias from my career that I'm optimistic that we will eventually get to a point where we
Okay,
can rely on AI more.
thank you. Let me give you my second objection that we'll see if you could overcome
Okay.
as a lawyer. So, number one, you've convinced me that this is just a tool that sometimes is wrong. We have to double check, but eventually it's going to get there where we'll all be comfortable with it. Second thing, and in the legal business, we have these rules of confidentiality that I believe are unmatched in any other profession. We are obligated to hold our clients' secrets in confidence, not even secrets. It might even be public, but I still can't go disclose it publicly if they wouldn't want me. It's that strong a burden of confidentiality. In fact, I kind of chuckle every once in a while. A potential client will ask me to sign an NDA. It's like, my obligations to you go way beyond anything you could put in an NDA.
Mhm.
Well, if I use an AI system, I'm going to be disclosing those secrets. And the example I like to use, and this is completely 100% made up, okay? Let's suppose, uh, big company, let's suppose Microsoft comes to me and says, hey, we're thinking of buying Apple. Can you just draft up a letter of intent for me? And I go on AI and I say, draw up a letter of intent for the purchase of Apple by Microsoft. And it does that. And we send it over. And by the way, I don't represent either of those companies. So this is, completely fictitious. And the deal doesn't go through. And well, that was a fun discussion. Let's move on. Well, now all of a sudden, AI thinks that Apple is buying Microsoft or vice versa, and somewhere down the road, it might use that information. And suppose that deal actually is a real deal. Well, now somebody's going to have information. They're going to know about it. I will have disclosed a client confidence, and I would have breached my ethical duties. And that's kind of the extreme, kind of silly example, but you get the idea. Just by
Yeah.
using this, I'm giving away secrets, and that might be out in the public. If it's a big, large language model, it might get out into the public. What's the response to that?
Yeah, security and confidentiality is paramount in this industry. There's no doubt about that. I think the risk of any confidential information leaking is so high and the damage is so high that there's zero willingness to take any probability of that happening. Um, so I think that's also front of mind for legal tech companies. So that's why I see companies making sure that they will get the certificates like GDPR, ISO 27001, and there's several others as well. These are like cloud security and also demonstration of their internal controls and cybersecurity controls, so that they need to pass a certain standard for them to be at least give law firms the assurance that there's some pillars in place for the company to protect your data. So that's one, is on the security side. And two is on the data storage. So these days, I think legal tech really need to be flexible when it comes to what the clients need for where the data storage is. So some might be very conservative and prefer for their data to be stored on premise. So they would have perhaps even the computing on premise. They would have GPUs in-house, the hardware, and they would say that even we would not even pass our data onto the cloud for it to be processed, computed through your algorithm. We want your algorithm to be on premise, and the computing is done locally. That
Yeah,
is one.
that's going to have to be the answer, I think. Which
That's
is going to create huge competitive advantages for some law firms over others if they manage their data super well.
exactly. That it is ultimately the most secure way to do things, but also there has been a trend towards moving everything on cloud, just because the maintenance that it takes and the operational burden for managing an on-premise and like actual hardware inside of the law firm, the security and maintenance of the hardware, is a big burden. And so there has been a trend towards moving on to secure cloud. Then the question becomes, how do you make sure the data is secure on the cloud? So there are several ways of doing it, whether the law firm can host their own private cloud, or they can have a secret key to the provider's cloud, depending on the risk appetite of the law firm. And it quite differs across the industry. Some are more, I guess, tech forward and risk taking and more comfortable with their data being on cloud, and others are less so. That's why I come back to the point of being flexible, like really being able to cater to whatever the law firm prefers and provide them with the solution that they're comfortable with. And the other point is that I think when it comes to where the data is stored, there's always nervousness around in case, oh, this data gets out of my hand. Even if I have a private key to the provider's cloud, the provider might be subpoenaed by the government, and in a case that's involving my client as the law firm, and I would have no control over what the supplier can do. And therefore, my client's document is leaked because they have worked with me. So this is, I guess, a more extreme case, but not impossible. And I observe that it is these cases, extreme cases, that makes law firm really nervous about agreeing with a third party about using their cloud. So it does create a lot of complexity for legal tech firms.
Yeah, okay. So this will be maybe the last Debbie Downer moment for you. The final objection is we've all heard, and we talked about this, so I won't belabor it, but we've all heard about the cases of lawyers, submitting false legal briefs because the AI they used to write their brief hallucinated and made up decisions that didn't exist. So I won't talk about that. However, here in Palo Alto, I'm right next door to Stanford, and Stanford has been, I think, one of the leaders in this whole area. I remember being on panels on AI in the law 10 years ago at Stanford Law School. And they've got some statistics that are a little alarming. They claim that AI-driven legal research, they hallucinate between 17 and 33% of the time, including false statements and incorrect citations. But as you said, that's just something that'll improve over time. But here's the bigger one. There's a study at Stanford Reg Lab and the Institute for Human-Centered AI that says hallucination rates for state-of-the-art language models go from 69% to 88% response to some legal queries. So kind of consistent with my experience. Now, against that, organizations like the American Bar Association have issued guidelines for lawyers. And I've got those guidelines and I've tried to read it. I read it. I don't know if, anyway. It emphasizes the need to understand the benefits and risks. And there's just a general duty of competence for lawyers, a duty of lawyers to remain competent and understand new technologies, and this falls within that. So that's one that any lawyer who's considering adopting these tools probably ought to take a look at the guidelines and be consistent with modern practice. You mentioned the other ones, the General Data Protection Regulations, GDPR, the California Consumer Privacy Act, which governs pretty strictly how data gets handled. And then recently, especially here in California, we're seeing rules and proposed laws relating to the development of AI. I won't go into that here. We've got a whole podcast that goes over that, a couple of them, in fact. So that's my background on this, and I guess that's all we need to say about that right now. What I want to turn to, you're a VC, is what's it like making these investments? Given all the problems that I, as a lawyer, have pointed out, what's the investment environment like? Are valuations good? Are a lot of deals? Is anybody emerging as a market leader, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, going back to the bias of the industry, we are tech optimists. Even though we see there's a lot of challenges ahead in the eventual adoption of technology, we think that there will be players, not just one, multiple players that will eventually become market leaders in this general efficiency AI space. Um, so that's why we remain positive and bullish in the sector and continue to look for perhaps the next legal tech that will eventually become the breakout. Um, I would say that the environment in general in venture capital has cooled down significantly after the very crazy phase of 2021, 22, where there was just a big hype in all things venture capital. We saw growth funds, even private equity funds, going in early stage and making investments profiles that they would never have been comfortable otherwise. So it was very crazy, and there was very little time to do due diligence for VC funds because the competition is so fierce. If you don't make a decision within a few days' time, there's another term sheet on the table by other funds. And so it was a very irrational period. And I would say that now, sitting in 2025, things have cooled down quite a bit and have rationalized. And because we've seen that a lot of the investments that people have made irrationally a few years back have not panned out as they had expected, because they were given extremely high valuation based off of not much fundamentals. So in our industry, because companies are typically loss-making at this stage, it is kind of not scientific to value companies, not as much as private equity, where you can look at free cash flow and actually expect how much money this company is going to make tangibly. So for us, the valuation is really a thumbs up and an estimate. Most of the time is based on the revenue of the business. But if a company is pre-revenue, then it's basically an art to come up with a number, how much the company is worth. So that's why this is the background to explain the irrational phase where people are just throwing numbers around and giving companies valuations that don't really mean much. So that said, in the current environment, I think even though deal volume has come down significantly, I think not yet half, but definitely dozens of percentages down from the 2021 phase. I think it's actually a good market for both startups and VCs to be in, because there's more time to do due diligence and more time to have discussions around what is the defensibility and what is the roadmap and how and why are you going to take over and win in this competitive market. So Yeah, I think that the investment decisions that we actually end up making, I'm talking about the market in general, is more rational, and hopefully money will actually be going to the teams that deserve it the most, and therefore will lead to the most productive outcome with the funding that goes into the industry. So yeah, I would say that sector-wise, AI is still all the hype, just because we know that there will be sector leaders in AI in different verticals, and so that's why I think there's a lot of still continued irrationality around the valuation in AI companies, but I think it's justifiably so.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear it. It's great to be on the cutting edge of this developing technology. It's going to change the practice of law as we know it, as far as I'm concerned. And I've seen a couple of iterations. Like I say, I started before there was Westlaw and Lexis, and I saw that come in and change the way we do business. I started, believe it or not, before people had PCs on their desk. And that again changed the practice as we know it. And I want to really thank you for introducing us to kind of the latest thing that's going to again probably create another revolution in the law. So this is Roger Royce, 10,000 Startups. Been talking with Nuan Zhang about AI and the law. Again, thanks for being here, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks so much, Roger.